Chapter 15. Jeff's bicycle gave me a brand new freedom, better than the roller skates I no longer missed. By July, the sun beat down on Shady Grove as if to bake it brown, the gentle rains forgotten. When the house was sweltering, I left it and wheeled around town, loving the wind blowing through my hair. Even a hot breeze feels cool when you're sweating. One day, not in the mood for anything else, I rode everywhere. Up around the courthouse, over to school and back, down past the corner lot. I slowed at the depot. It looked different, smaller than when we'd said goodbye to Jeff there. The junkyard lay beyond the depot. It was more than a junkyard, but not much more. At the front corner was a barn red shanty. Jenkins Antiques was hand painted on a board nailed to the door. Everyone called the junkyard operator Junker, although I suppose he had some other first name. I had heard he went through the impossibly worn out stuff people threw away and managed to rescue some of it. Anything that could be made to work, he set up on shelves and called antiques. I rode past quickly. It gave me the creeps. Just past the junkyard, the grain elevator towered against a blue sky. Beyond that lay a field of wheat, golden brown as old Wolf's coat and tall as a baseball bat. The grain rippled in the wind. Oceans rippled like that, I'd heard. If Billy Riggs lived further out than this, he surely had a long walk to school. Without admitting to myself that I'd been looking for him, I turned around and pedaled back toward home. Then I saw it, set back from the road between the junkyard and the grain elevator. I'd missed it as I was going out. The house was more like a shack, the color of dirt, with shingles on the sides as well as on the roof. You couldn't tell where the junkyard ended and the shack's yard began. I thought I saw a curtain flapping through through an open screenless window. A rusty pump stood near the house. There really was a well. I shivered, remembering what Billy had said about his pot. I stomped on the pedals, sending spurts of gravel out from under my tires, and pumped with all my might. Scott showed up at the garden on Saturday with the shiner as purple as plums. You, Walker, a black eye? Andy sounded jealous. Scott picked up a hoe and began hacking. I shot Andy a look, but he and the others were bound to stare at Scott until he explained. Had a run in with Billy, he said. Riggs? Andy's eyes were wide. He made a fist. Scott shook his head. My fault. I swung first. Wow, said Andy. Does he look as bad? I wouldn't doubt it. We saw that Scott didn't intend to explain further, but he saw that we didn't intend to let it go. Billy insulted my dad. He put a hand to his swollen eye. Sometimes it is worth it, he said. I wondered if Billy would ever show his face again after that, but I saw him one day from the mulberry tree. I was dying to ask him what he'd said. Not that bluntly, of course, but I wasn't about to let him see me my hiding place. I waited for him to pass by, then climbed down and went through the house to the front porch. He had to come back this way eventually. I sat on the shady side and leafed through one of the Life magazines that had piled up in the living room. It was hard to get around to them all since they came every week. I caught my breath at a picture and its caption. Germany's great naval base at Kiel is bombed by US liberators. Great fists of smoke reached up from ships in a harbor as though to clutch the airplanes overhead. I'd know those planes anywhere. I felt numb. Which was I really proud or scared? None of the stories in my scrapbook had pictures quite like this, and in the poster on my bedroom wall, the B 24s were clean, in crisp colors, flying into a clear blue sky. It didn't take long for Billy to come sauntering back by. He sported a wicked yellow circle around one eye. We talked about airplanes again. It seemed to be the only thing, other than tomatoes, that we could talk about. I should have known that would lead to a fight, but he didn't have to say what he said. I was going on nervously about Jeff and his B 24 when Billy said, Them bombers ain't so hot. They'd be dead without the lightnings. They'd be what? How dare you? I shouted. I'll say this for Billy. He looked embarrassed when he realized what he said, and he didn't walk away. Well, not dead, but. Well, yeah, probably. You're making that up. I felt my face going red. Ain't neither. You ask your brother. I'm asking you, what's a light beam anyway? I hated it that Billy knew something about planes that I didn't. Lightning. It's a Lockheed P 38. Dandy little fighter plane, one of ours. Flies along to keep the Japanese Zero from shooting down your brother's B 24. I hated him, but he wouldn't stop. Not only that, some P 38s carry bombs of their own. That's the truth. I ain't making that up. How do you know this? Just do. You ain't the only one knows stuff. Then he muttered, as if to himself, You and that prissy Walker. Aha, I was about to find out. Scott, prissy? Scott's the man of his house. He's responsible for his mom and three other kids. His dad is. I know about his dad. Big deal. I wanted to tell him that it was a big deal, that Scott's dad was making a sacrifice, and that Scott was too. I wanted to say that he should be grateful his own dad was home, but he wouldn't have heard me. He didn't seem to like anyone, not Mr. Burt, not any of the kids, not Miss Elliot, whom everybody else liked, not my mother, who gave him chicken, nor my dad, who fixed his shoes. Look, I've tried to be nice to you, I said. Yeah, tried, like it was some stinking chore. Chore? I glared. Yeah, chore. You guys think you're better than anybody. You always bragging about your hero brother, Walker, lording in over everybody 'cause his dad's in the army. I bit my tongue hard. At least Scott's father wasn't a drunk. Is that why you punched him? He punched me. Okay. Is that why he punched you? Because his dad's in the army? Because you don't like that? What's it to you anyway? I was shouting again. Billy shot back. Well, what's it to you? This time I did the leaving. I stomped into the house and banged the door shut. When I was sure Billy was gone, I went out back to the mulberry tree. I closed my eyes and tried to see Jeff soaring over Europe, free and high above the battle. The image would no longer come. I went to his room. I could talk to him better there. The plane on his wall mocked me. It was a box just like Billy had said at the bootery, chunkier than the sleeker, smaller models on Jeff's bookshelves and windowsills. Why did Jeff like it so much? I knelt before the bookshelf and ran my finger along the books on the bottom shelf, tall books like the Book of Knowledge and Jeff's old notebooks. I pulled out some of the notebooks. They were filled with drawings of airplanes, hand drawn maps with dotted lines marking famous flights and notes in Jeff's peculiar scrawl. He had pages and pages of the stuff. I never get through it to learn why this B 24 was so important. A sheaf of notebook paper folded lengthwise fell out, a school assignment. On the half sheet cover was printed American Aviation and What It Means to Me, Senior Paper by Jeffrey Allen Marks, May 15th, 1941. That was just weeks before he went away. The teacher's handwriting under the date said, A plus, good writing, good luck up there. I unfolded it. Aviation was born in 1903, Jeff had written. Only one other thing as important as that took place that year. My father was born. I hadn't thought of that. I read quickly through the first part. I had heard it many times. The Wright brothers flyer, one with its motorcycle engine, flying from Kitty Hawk for almost 1 minute, reaching a height of 15 feet. More names I'd heard from Jeff and Dad. Eddie Rickenbacker, the great war ace, resented by Army brass who didn't have much use for airplanes and hated it that Rickenbacker got twice the pay of an Army platoon leader. Billy Mitchell, outspoken in his call for more U.S. planes. Then came several pages about transatlantic flights. I learned something new. Charles Lindbergh had not been the first to fly across the Atlantic, but he had been the first to fly alone nonstop and in a small airplane. I sat on the floor, my back against the bookshelf, reading. 24 years after the Wrights' 1 minute trip in their flying motorcycle, Charles Lindbergh flew for 33 and a half hours, covering 3,600 miles. At that time, Jeffrey Allen Marks, future pilot, was 4 years old. Well, he was sure of himself, wasn't he? That was Jeff. Less than a decade after Lindbergh's long flight across the sea, Amelia Earhart from Kansas incidentally attempted a round the world flight and was lost. It was tragic, but Miss Earhart flew for the best reason anyone has ever had. She loved it. I decided not to ponder Amelia's fate. Finally, I found what I was looking for. In January 1939, General Henry H. Hap Arnold asked the Consolidated Aircraft Company to design a bomber superior to the B 17. It had to go faster, further, and higher. It was the B 24. So there, Billy Riggs. It did all those things, but was not quite as steady. Oh, well. The bomb bay has room for 8,000 pounds of explosives. Wow, that would take a box. Consolidated Aircraft built the first B 24s in San Diego, California, and sold them to Great Britain, already at war with Germany. The British flew the first B 24 just 4 months before I sat down to write this paper. They call it the Liberator. It is the biggest, best bomber yet, and I am going to fly one someday. I didn't find anything about P 38s in Jeff's report. Did Billy know what he was talking about? I decided to ask Jeff and pulled out a blank Vmail sheet. Dear Jeff, thanks for your letter. I've saved all your letters in the cedar box you gave me one Christmas. The gardens are growing. We tried to make Mother say which side she was on, but she ducked. She's neutral, she says. The kids are making money. Every week we pay the Chronicle for our ad and go to the Guarantee Bank to buy our stamps. We keep a nickel apiece out for ice cream and hit the sweet shop. Then I told him what Billy had said, and about how Billy was so hard to understand sometimes. Why do some people just want to make trouble, Jeff? I wrote. I had rambled on to the bottom of the page, so I ended with, I'll explain the secret weapon in my next letter. I'd cooled off some by the time I'd finished the letter and gone out to my bike. Billy was always walking off, but he never stomped away screaming mad, except when Andy had bloodied his shirt. Maybe I was the one who started our arguments. Maybe I owed him an apology. I kicked up the stand, jumped on a pedal, and threw my leg over the bar. The bike lurched and wobbled under me. I turned around to look at the back tire. Flat. The bicycle pump didn't help. The tire would not hold the air. I knew there were no new bicycle tires to be had in Shady Grove. If you couldn't get one, you just had to abandon your bike for the duration. I wondered how I had ever lived without mine, and now I could never, and how I ever could again. I thought of walking Old Wolf out past Billy's, finding a way to make conversation, but I remembered what Billy had said. His pop would kick a dog down the well. Besides, it was scorching hot outside. Maybe I'd wait for a cooler day. The next day was no cooler. I sat on the front porch reading the Chronicle. Old Wolf stretched out at my feet. I always read the local news first. Who had out of town company? Who had a new baby? What were the ladies' clubs doing? Sometimes Mother's name was there, along with those of their other wives. Mrs. Allen Marks, Mrs. Ben Noor, and Mrs. James Bowen attended a Red Cross class. I wondered why the women were called by their husbands' names instead of their own. My own name had been there in the young sprout story. The new paper boy never stopped to talk, and I sorely missed Koopa. So when Billy shuffled up the walk, I was just glad to see somebody. Hi, I said, wondering what had brought him around again. Hi. He had one arm behind him. Brought you something. He turned around so I could see it. I couldn't think of anything to say as I reached for the thin balsa model, a twin-tailed B 24. It's from a cereal box, but it's wood, and I put it together myself, he said. Thought you like it. I do, thanks. I blinked hard. Billy rubbed Old Wolf's head. Okay if I run him? Sure. You could ride along on your bike, he said, giving me a sideways glance. I can't. It has a flat. Let's see. I wheeled the bike around from the back. Billy tried a tire pump, but I was right. Air leaked out again. Where's that tub we washed Old Wolf in? By the time I had brought the tub around and filled it from the hose, Billy had the tire off the wheel and the tube pulled out of it. He pressed the tube into the water, moving it so that only a part of it was under at one time. Finally, tiny bubbles floated up to the surface. There's your problem, a hole. Got any chalk? I found some in Mother's sewing box. He took the tube out and dried off the offending spot with his shirt tail. Hold on to it right here, he said. He marked the spot with the chalk, then pulled something out of his pocket. This'll do it. Now, how did he just happen to have a tire patch in his overall pocket? And glue. Let her get good and dry, he said when he finished. He set the tube aside and ran his hands around the tire. Thought so. You picked up an old shingle nail. He pulled it out with his teeth. These are devils, he said between his teeth, then spat the nail into his hand. Happens all the time. He bounced the nail in his hand. Got a lot of these out by the junkyard. I ducked my head. Thanks for fixing it, I said. For the plane, too. Sure, he whistled for Old Wolf. Come on, dog, let's run. As I watched them tear off, I counted the good things Billy had done for me. Found Old Wolf, walked him, helped with the secret weapon, brought me a present and fixed my tire. In between times, he just dropped out of sight. What would he be up to next? I carried the airplane inside as carefully as if it had been a baby bird and put it on Jeff's dresser. That seemed to be where it belonged.